Dr. Eben Alexander, who spent 25 years as an academic neurosurgeon at institutions like Harvard Medical School before a week-long coma and transcendental near-death experience redefined his understanding of reality. Now a best-selling author of books like Living in a Mindful Universe, available in the bookstore, he works to reconcile quantum physics with spiritual experience. He is joined by Karen Newell, a personal development specialist and pioneer in audio meditation. As the co-founder of Sacred Acoustics, Karen teaches practical techniques for exploring consciousness, helping others connect with their inner guidance and achieve emotional wellness. We're in for a real treat today. Just so you all know, about halfway through the session, there will be a meditation, and you are welcome to go to the back of the room to lie down for that portion of the session. All right. So with that, let's give a round of applause to our presenters, Dr. Eben Alexander and Karen Newell.
Thank you very much. It's a joy to be here. As I mentioned last night, this is one of my favorite spots on earth to share this, and especially because of the wonderful souls that are there. Now we're going to talk today about more about near-death experiences. This is really about accessing the spiritual realm, the many ways that we have kind of spontaneous connections there that teach us of this ongoing nature of soul and the eternity of our loving relationships. After-death communications can give us great relief in the face of bereavement or loss, and that is something that Karen's going to talk about extensively in just a few minutes. What I want to focus on is my own journey and that beautiful guardian angel that I mentioned. And of course, I was unaware of the NDE literature before my coma. And so I had no idea what the kind of structure was to be like. And it was only after my coma, after I'd originally written down about 20,000 words of the experience, because I didn't want to have it tainted by anyone else's NDE. So I wrote down that raw database at the advice of my older son, Eben IV, who told me, write it all down. He was majoring in neuroscience in college at the time, and he knew every time you touch a memory, it can be altered. So he wanted a fresh version of everything, and that's what he advised me to do. But that guardian angel was a deep mystery to me. If I had scripted the whole thing, my adoptive father, who had passed over 4 years before my coma, would have been the guardian angel, and yet he was nowhere to be found. And as I describe in the book, Living in a Mindful Universe, I found out years later in a meditation why that was the case and why, in essence, I needed a much deeper dive. That's why I needed the amnesia, which is a very unusual ingredient, and yet in looking back on it, it makes perfect sense to me why I had to have that ingredient for me to get to an understanding of the reality of the experience. But Betsy was that beautiful guardian angel, as I described last night. When I got the picture in the mail 4 months after my coma, I mean, I'll never forget. It was such a powerful experience getting the picture that was sent to me by my birth sister, Kathy, who had promised to one day send me a picture of Betsy. And when that picture arrived, I remember looking at it and just the terrible tragedy. It was taken 3 weeks before she passed from this world at the age of 38, back in 1998. And to me, it was so tragic. I just remember my eyes filling with tears, misting over, just this incredible kind of heart sense of loss that this beautiful birth sister, who I'd never known, and yet there was something kind of haunting in the whole experience. And it was only the next day in reading Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book. It's a book called Life After Death. It was published in 1991. And on page 28 of that book, she describes an NDE of a young girl who has this profound experience, is welcomed to this blissful, beautiful heaven by her brother. And he kind of shows her around, helps her make a decision about whether or not she should go back. And she comes back to this world, comes out of her coma. But when she's talking over with her father, she says, "But I don't understand. I never had a brother." And he said, "Well, you did, but your brother died 3 months before you were born, so we never told you about him." And that's when I looked up on the dresser at that picture that had come in the mail the day before that had caused such emotional kind of angst in me. And I looked up. It's almost like she's looking at me like, do you finally get it? Yes, Betsy, I finally get it. And that smile, those sparkling blue eyes, the high forehead, high cheekbones, broad smile, every bit of it was right there in that picture. And that's when I realized, oh my God, it really happened. The reason it seemed way too real to be real, because it really happened. But it didn't happen in the material realm. This is the important thing to get. We're all so kind of based in this material world and its kind of illusion of time flow that we think this is our ultimate reality. But NDEs show us something much richer and deeper about our existence as souls, our interconnection with each other, and that interconnection with that God force, that co-creative force at the core of the universe. And I'll never forget the kind of battle I went through after waking up from coma, trying to make sense of all this. And this kind of wrestling match in my own mind, at times thinking it was way too real to be real. Those were the words I used with my son. And to me, that was advice from my doctors who told me, you know, dying brain plays all kinds of tricks. They dismissed it. But when I then went back into my medical records with other experts reviewing the medical records, we realized my brain was in no shape to have any kind of dream or hallucination, much less the most fantastic phenomenal experience of my entire existence. So that was a tremendous lesson. And I will say that I think that true open-minded skepticism is a beautiful gift in this journey. It's what strengthens the steel. I mean, if we're going to believe in our kind of metaphysical systems and assumptions and ideas about the world, they need to be strong. And that means they need to be something that works against various arguments and onslaughts. And that's why I think that a kind of a dark night of the soul, like I had for those 8 years before coma that I described last night, are so absolutely critical. So Betsy offered me peace and comfort in that Gateway Valley during the coma, especially proving the reality of the experience. And importantly, it brings up a concept that, and this is all in the background where skeptics would suggest that such experiences are the result of expectations, wishful thinking, that somehow provide these convincing examples that occur to us. But given that I had no idea who Betsy was before my coma, you know, where did that come from? I had no idea. There was no way I could construct that in my own mind as kind of wishful thinking. And yet she was so prominent. She was there every time I passed through that Gateway Valley realm. Always the same beautiful message of love and comfort. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You're richly cared for. And that, to me, I cannot tell you, it showed me in a powerful way that was spiritual home. And that's another thing that I think most NDEers would agree on, is when we get there, we realize, although these words may sound bizarre to some people, ultimately, it's something we've all done before. And this is through that strong scientific evidence of reincarnation. This is why I believe all of our souls have had some practice in this. And that's why when we get into an NDE, it's a reminder of something that's very comforting about our spiritual home. So this brings us to peak and Darian experiences. That's a term that comes from the NDE literature. That was actually a term that I believe was first offered up by Dr. Bruce Grayson. Bruce Grayson was the son of a biochemist. He's a very skeptical psychiatrist who's worked at the University of Virginia since the 1970s. And Grayson has probably done more than just about any other MD on earth in terms of publications to kind of elucidate the near-death experience phenomenon. And for those who aren't familiar with the University of Virginia, I strongly recommend go to their website, uvadops.org. That's the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies.org. And you'll find a lot of books, papers, a lot of hot links to scientific papers, etc. And it supports not only near-death experiences, but a tremendous amount of research into parapsychology, into telepathy, psychokinesis, and they have this giant database of past life memories in children, more than 2,500 cases they've looked at, 1,700 solved. So their work is very remarkable and worth paying attention to. Now, in one particular paper that we're referencing here, by Bruce Grayson. And this was a study of 665 near-death experiences in his database. And what he noted was that 21% of those NDEs involved encounters with loved ones who were deceased. And that's compared to only 4% of NDE encounters where you encounter people still embodied in physical form in the current time. So basically 5 times as many of those kind of visitations or contacts in a near-death experience environment are of people who have passed from this world. And that's very important because what it shows is it reveals the continuity of our soul lines, of our relationships with loved ones, do not end with bodily death. And this peak and Darian notion is where you encounter someone in that environment, and it's so shocking. You know, I'll describe the various archetypes in just a minute, but it's so shocking. Peak and Darian is a reference to the first European explorers who got to Panama after sailing across the Atlantic and the Caribbean. And they climbed the mountains there at Darian, and they were expecting to see this tremendous continent stretching to the west. Instead, they got to the top, and there's this giant ocean, you know, continuing around the world. And it was so shocking, it brought them to their knees. They were all like, how can this be? And Bruce kind of likens the shock of encountering souls of departed loved ones to the same kind of shock that those explorers experienced. Now, he talks about 3 different types of peak and Darian experiences. The first type is where the deceased person died some time ago, yet that death was unknown to the experiencer who sees them now. And there are many stories that follow that particular lineage. Now, then there's a second type where the deceased person died at the same time or immediately before the experiencer, but still unknown to the experiencer by normal means to be dead. And I'll give one very interesting case that I think is historically important. Historically, that is in the history of the United States. It has to do with John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, the second and third presidents of the United States. And they both signed the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. Fast forward 50 years to the day. They're both on their deathbeds, kind of unknown to either one of them. And it turned out that the last words John Adams said were, "Thomas Jefferson still survives." Turns out Thomas Jefferson had passed over 5 hours before John Adams. And I think that this is a beautiful example of a peak and Darian experience where Thomas Jefferson, recently departed, is so excited about reuniting with his friend Adams, who's also departing the physical world. Astonishing, that kind of synchronicity that this is all happening to the day 50 years later. And I believe that that statement from Adams may very well have been an admission of this kind of beautiful peak and Darian experience that happened in our nation's history. Now, there's a third category, and this is the one that I'm interested in because of my experience, where the deceased person was unknown to the experiencer, and yet very important to them in life. And that's why my discovery of my birth family is so kind of shocking and contributory to my understanding of all this. That happened a year before my coma. And it was all a necessary step when I look back on it all, because my beautiful guardian angel was someone who I would only find out about with that birth family. But in fact, that finding out happened after my NDE, which kind of increased my level of surprise that this beautiful girl on the butterfly wing was a birth sister who I had never known. And there's much more to that story from the adoption side, but we don't have time to go into any of that today. So it turns out that this is also very much the case in hospice studies. One of the complaints people have about near-death experiences, they say, well, you know, those people didn't die. I want to know what happens when you really die. And that's where the hospice literature, and we mentioned last night the work of Christopher Kerr, Kerr, in his beautiful book, Yeah, Death is But a Dream. That came out about 6 or 7 years ago. But the interesting thing, and this is validated not just in hospice studies and in terminal care, in all kinds of environments, prison, hospice, what have you, these beautiful stories of loved ones coming to escort us over. I mentioned last night Gregory Shushan and his work. He's written about, he's an anthropologist, he's written about ancient cultures, Aboriginal cultures, etc. And the most common event at death in those cultures is where the loved ones, the ancestors, come to welcome you over. Obviously, many of those cultures have a big focus on, the ancestors and how they contribute. And when you pay attention, many of those cultures treat those ancestors as if they're still alive and available through meditation or just to give advice on a regular basis. And this is why I think, NDEs in many ways are kind of the tip of the spear. To kind of wake us up to this. But it's all these other phenomena that are around it, the after-death communications, deathbed dreams and visions, the business about past life memories in children, indicative of reincarnation. When you start to combine all of these kind of empirical observations about human existence, they start adding up to a far richer picture of who we are and what we're doing here. How it's all about that one mind. We're connected through that God mind, and yet we're given the gift of free will. And the deep scientific evidence for free will is quantum indeterminacy, which I won't get into today, but it has everything to do with the fact that people often observe that quantum physics is not completely deterministic, but more probabilistic. And what that really means is sentient beings guide the unfolding of reality through their choices, through the mental realm. What John Wheeler, who was on the Manhattan Project, he was the head of physics at Princeton for a while, etc., he came up with what he called the participatory anthropic principle to explain quantum physics, entanglement, superposition, etc. But that concept is really one that says mind is primary. The physical emerges from mind. And the more deeply you get into quantum physics, you start to realize that's absolutely true. Our mind determines our unfolding reality. And the more we believe that, understand it, and start to investigate it, the more actual power we have for this kind of thing. Now, I'd like to finish simply by mentioning, I mentioned last night that my mother, at age 99 in April 2019, right after we were here with William Peters and Monica Williams, again with discussions of shared crossings, etc. That's when Karen and I went home, and that's when my mom passed 2 days later. But she had that beautiful visualization at the end where she saw her own mother, came up out of coma. Call my children, get them here. My mother's really here. Once I heard that, I knew that was real. It's not a hallucination or a dream. These are extraordinary examples of our ongoing connection with loved ones. Brings up a concept of the terminal delusions and terminal lucidity. I mentioned that briefly last night. That's kind of what Mom had. There's a beautiful example in the book Proof of Heaven where friend of mine who was the head of a top neurosurgical program on Earth had this beautiful situation with his father who was passing from this world. The father saw a vision of his own mother. They'd been together during the Holocaust where the mother had died. This man had been 14 at the time, never talked about it. And yet here, as he's on his deathbed, many years later, my friend's at the bedside. The friend realizes that the father is seeing the soul of his mother right there at the foot of the bed. Absolutely real without question. So, and the father was enlivened by this. He'd been comatose for weeks and yet came back to life and was very relieved, smile on his face as he passed from this world. So I think with that, what I'd like to do is open it up to some Q&A because we have much more to cover and am I not right on the timing?
I thought you had a few more minutes, and you had more stuff.
Well, the only last thing I'll mention, but I do want to get into our Q&A to give people time for that, is a beautiful, beautiful story of kind of this, of an after-death communication. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is well known as an investigator in this world. She had been a Swiss nurse, toured Dachau as a teenager right after it was liberated, was mystified by the butterflies carved into the wall, etc., by the children in the death camp. And she had, a lifelong study of all this. But it turns out early in her career, where she was trying to talk about the afterlife and the reality of it, she was hitting so much pushback from people, and this is all back in the 1970s and late 60s. So much pushback that she decided she couldn't do it anymore, and she was walking down the hallway to go to her boss and say, "I can't do this anymore. It's just not working. I'm getting a lot of pushback from everybody." And as she's getting close to the office, she encounters this woman who's walking down the hallway towards her, and she recognizes, "Oh my gosh, that's Mrs. Schwartz." Mrs. Schwartz was one of the first NDE cases she'd ever had, and that was a person who had also died 10 months earlier. But there she is, embodied, coming forwards. And she said, "Dr. Kubler-Ross, you must continue your work. It's very important. It's going to change the world." And Kubler-Ross was so with it in the moment. She said, "Well, please write me a note to that effect and sign your name." And she did. And so Kubler-Ross had this piece of paper of solid physical evidence of the reality, and Miss Schwartz wandered down the hall and just disappeared. And that's when Kubler-Ross said, "I think I'll keep going with this work." So brilliant the way these things happen. We need to open our minds to it all, and now I think we do have...
I made a mistake. We're going to 1 inch.
Oh.
You can start questions, but now you have 15 minutes, and that's fine.
Oh, my gosh. We have extra time for Q&A. So that's fantastic. Unless we've answered all the questions. Probably not. But we have a talking stick. We'll pass it around.
First of all, I just want to say I love your story. It's fabulous, and I really think that you were picked personally to deliver this message to everybody. It has a personal effect, obviously, on your life, and you realize that. And relationship with God is all a personal, subjective thing. So obviously, it was for you. But you're such a good speaker. You're such a good writer, and also you know so much about the way the mind works that you're just the perfect person to deliver the message. So I just wanted to say that. And the second thing I wanted to say, and I want to say this, and I don't want to say this in terms of rational thinking. I want to take a look at this as irrational. So you mentioned about your imaging studies when you were in coma. And I'd like you to talk about your imaging studies from two perspectives. One, the structural and the functional perspectives. So if you had a structural diagnostic imaging, I want you to tell us about it and what it showed. And then if you had a functional imaging, I want you to tell us what kind of imaging it was. In other words, is this glucose uptake? Is this oxygen uptake? Did it show that there was no uptake?
Got it. I can get into it. So
then I just want to...
the thing is, you got to remember, in retrospect, wow, wouldn't it be great to have functional MRI, magnetoencephalography, spectral EEG, all this analysis of my brain when I was in coma having this experience. Problem is, what my doctor friends were facing was a 54-year-old male who was in extreme distress, trying to die. In fact, the ER doctor who saw me thought I might not even get out of the ER alive. That's how deathly ill I was. They put me on 3 powerful antibiotics at the get-go. I was deep in coma by the time I hit the... but the more, okay, we'll get to the scans in a second, but more important than the scans are really the neurologic exams. And the neurologic exams showed that my Glasgow coma scale was down around 5 or 6. Anything below 9 is deep coma. A corpse gets a 3. So, being 5, 6, or 7 is deathly ill. My oculocardiac reflex was gone. That's a deep brainstem reflex. Usually when that's lost, you're lost. The scans are important because they contribute that no part of my neocortex was unscathed. I had full thickness swelling, edema into the white matter everywhere. There was no part unscathed. My brainstem was inflamed, and that's really on day 1. So I was in very deep trouble from the get-go. And I think that's why the medical case report, if you're interested, go to Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease, September 2018. Dr. Serbi Khanna, Lauren Moore, Bruce Grayson wrote a medical case report on my case. And they did that because they realized that my very survival was something that didn't have an explanation. I mean, my full recovery. They estimated I had a 2% chance of survival by the end of the week, but no chance of recovery. You know, severe gram-negative bacterial meningoencephalitis for 7 days, deep coma. When you go into coma over 3 hours, all very, very bad news. And the global description was really available from the MRI and CT scan. CT with enhancement just showed pus filling my sulci everywhere and in front of the brainstem. So that's a very, very dire picture, but I hope that kind of helps you understand. The sad thing is I went in status epilepticus. They were able to break the seizures. But then they didn't do another EEG. And that's because I was so sick that they thought that even the setup for the EEG was more than was warranted, and I was doomed anyway. But in retrospect, yes, it would have been wonderful if they'd at least done an EEG. And we know from many other meningitis cases what that probably would have showed, but I'd like to know what it would have showed. So thanks for your question. Yeah, well, we can't hear, so
But just ask,
we need talking stick time right now because
we have limited time for questions.
Just to comment for people who don't have medical knowledge, and because it's a complicated thing, when the cortex is swollen, this is something you actually see with your eyes, and you can say like probabilities and stuff, but people don't recover from this. And
Right.
plus, people don't get E. coli meningitis as a 54-year-old.
No.
People don't have the experience you did, and so don't have to talk about rationality, right? You just,
right.
it's a supernatural intervention.
Yeah, thank you for adding all that. I would simply say NDEs are always tailored for the individual who has them. There's no other reason for them to exist, but when you study them in large numbers, they start to paint this incredibly rich picture.
So I wanted to see if I heard it correctly. You said 4% of NDE experiencers encounter someone who is actually still alive.
Right, in their visions of an NDE, correct, versus 21% of those encounters are of people who have passed from this world.
Yeah, because I've heard of people having out-of-the-body experience, obviously seeing people who are still alive, working on their bodies, et cetera. But of all the dozens of NDE accounts I've read or listened to, I've never heard of somebody's encounter of somebody who's still alive. Could you give me an example?
Yeah, in my case, okay, in the book Proof of Heaven, it turns out that yes, I had plenty of, that beautiful peak and Darian experience with my birth sister, but also towards the very end when there were thousands of people going off in the distance, heads bowed, murmuring energy that I called the power of prayer to draw me back in my writings. In that vision were two people who were still alive, Michael Sullivan and his wife Paige. Michael was our Episcopal rector. He lived 2 houses up from us, a great family friend, and his son was best friends with Bond, et cetera, very, very close. And he was there through much of this. He had gotten there when I said, God help me at the very beginning, which for 4 seconds gave me 11 Glasgow coma scale points. But other than that, I was down 5, 6, 7. But I saw them, and as I describe in the book, I knew on Thursday afternoon, 4th day of coma, Michael was at home, or in his office at church, got a call, Eben's dying. This is a nurse, you've got to come now. And so he's driving through a pouring rain, tears streaming through his eyes, getting ready to go to the hospital and deliver last rites for me. And he calls his wife Paige and says, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't have the strength. Please pray for me and pray for Eben. And I know that she was at home praying. He was praying in the car. And when they got to the hospital, no nurse had called. And there's so much kind of interesting stuff that goes on. But anyway, they were still alive, and they were very strong parts of my vision. I didn't know who they were when I saw them, but the visual image of both of them praying was logged in like everything else. Thanks for your question.
Lots of folks sense people praying for them when they're in NDEs.
Like Anita Morjani, another example, she talks about her brother who was flying from India to Hong Kong when she was extremely sick, expected to die, and she kind of had a mind meld with him, so that it happens. Yes.
So I've had an experience that I haven't heard until you talked about the Schwartz woman.
Right.
Without going into the whole long story, but my great-grandmother and I were very close. She was from Hungary. She lived with me until I was 12, then she went home and she died, and then all sorts of sort of strange things turned up at our house that fit me 100%. So there's more to the story, but then fast forward until I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and a friend of mine says, there's a psychic, so I talked to the psychic, which I wasn't really into at all at the time, and she says, talk to your guardian angels. She acknowledged my grandmother, like she gave my grandmother's name, which was what connects us. She says, talk to your guardian angels. I was in bed. I said, okay, well, Mama, give me a sign. 2 days later, I'm in Granville Island Public Market in Vancouver, BC. My little one has to go to the bathroom. She's being toilet trained. We're in the big bathroom. And out from 2 doors down comes my great-grandmother, 20 years after her death. Babushka, you know, like the whole thing. And it was her, but I was thrown because she was short.
Uh-huh.
And when I was 12, it was
Right,
the
she was
other
tall.
way around. And she just came out, and there was no warm welcome. There was no ghostliness. She was physical, like as real as anybody. And she says, that is the second one, and that is the first one. And then I said, excuse me, and I'm just like, what do I do now? Like, all of this is running through my mind, and how is she going to disappear? And then she repeats the same thing again, and then she walks out. And I want to follow her and sort of hide behind the tomatoes, but with the 2 kids and just what happened, I didn't.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Absolutely real. And if more people would share those kinds of stories, you know, we'd understand these spiritual connections are absolutely concrete reality.
But after the Q&A, I'm going to speak exactly to what those kind of experiences are. So
Thank you.
They're called
Thank you.
after-death communications.
Right.
Thank you.
And you'll get some statistics. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Now, what time do we have
Still
here?
have 5 minutes.
We have 5. Oh, good. Okay.
more question?
Maybe 2.
Whatever we
Maybe
get in
2.
5 minutes.
Thank you very much for your talk. I wanted to share that I'm trained as a scientist, so I'm also come from a materialistic background. I remember learning in school that our psychology professor said that it's impossible, that they did studies on prayer, and he said there is nothing, no outcomes for prayer other than it helps the person that they know that they're praying to, but there's no link. And it was also like against ghosts and all that things. So I also have many friends who have a Hindu background and said like we knew each other from another life. And I was just looking for some scientific studies about quantum mechanics and to show that these sorts of supernatural things can happen. I was just curious. Thank you.
So
I would
it's
like some convincing.
okay. Well, I mean, I would suggest you read "Living in a Mindful Universe." That completely pulls the spiritual and scientific picture together. Has a fairly extensive discussion of the quantum physics. But I think the what? Yeah, an excellent resource for the scientific mind. And what I can tell you is this site basically is beyond a doubt scientific proof of the reality of the afterlife. It's a website called bigelowinstitute.org. It's a set Bigelow, Bigelow, institute.org. And you'll find 29 essays that were all written 5 years ago in a contest. And they're from all different directions. Everyone is from a scientist with at least 5 years' experience researching the afterlife question. And they all point to the absolute reality of this. One paper you'd be especially interested in with that question is the paper by Bernardo Kastrup. He's kind of a modern idealist. He was an endorser of our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. We've endorsed a lot of his work. But he wrote an incredibly good paper that's basically only quantum physics and describes, the relationship between quantum physics and consciousness in a way that makes it clear that consciousness is not generated by the brain.
And Pim Van Lommel's paper does as well?
Yeah, Pim Van Lommel, he won second place in that contest, and he has a beautiful essay that really gets into it. In fact, he's the one who, at the end of his essay, approaches the one mind hypothesis. And in his essay, he recommends One Mind, the book by Larry Dossey, our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, a book called Spiritual Science by Steve Taylor, and also a paper by Bernardo Kastrup in the Journal of Consciousness Studies in 2018 called The Universe in Consciousness. Those 4 resources, and I would add Pim Van Lommel's book, Consciousness Beyond Life, as incredibly rich in explaining why quantum physics is relevant and why it shows us that we're sharing one mind and that we're all interconnected, and yet free will is absolutely alive and well through quantum indeterminacy. And when you realize that neurons are not like a billiard table with billiard balls in Newtonian physics, they are quantum systems. Everything about a neuron, whether it fires or doesn't, has to do with ion channels and synaptic vesicles and molecules, all of which follow Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and all of which are subject to superposition and entanglement. And this is where top-down causality is an important concept.
Next question.
We have room for one more. I guess that's the hook.
We can go on and on about the quantum physics.
Well, harking back to quantum physics, you had mentioned maybe 10 minutes ago something about a prehistoric society or a culture that had talked about that related the physical world with the spiritual world, and without this, all things in the physical world derive from a spiritual aspect.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that just a little more, and what was it you had mentioned?
Yes, I think most importantly is to pay attention to life reviews, and I think we'll be discussing them more tomorrow, or maybe tonight. But the important thing to get about life reviews is they're not dreams, hallucinations. They are a reliving of events, as if the events are still ongoing. 1/3 of people who have life reviews have their whole life processed like that during an NDE. And you say, how can that happen during a 10-minute cardiac arrest? It's because in that realm, you're completely outside of Earth time. This is illusory, this flow of Earth time. And life reviews are one example that show us this much broader aspect. It's amazing the universe is paying so much attention to our thoughts and actions that we relive a lot of that as part of basically moral, ethical lessons and coming closer to the souls we came here to be. So life reviews are a demand that we revise our views of ontology and the way everything works, but an acknowledgement of the primacy of mind and consciousness and of experience of sentient beings. Beyond just the workings of the physical universe. So I hope that helps. So without further ado, I'm sorry, we'll have some time maybe in the debrief after the meditation for more. I am so grateful for this beautiful soul right here. She's the founder of Sacred Acoustics, a form of binaural beat brainwave entrainment, which I use an hour or two a day. I've been doing that the last 12 or 13 years. Personal experience is the key to coming to know all of this, going within, meditation. And Karen is an expert at this. And so without further ado, Karen Newell.
Thank you. So we are going to do an experiential meditation, but first I want to talk a little bit about these after-death communications. So Eben gave a very stunning example of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and we got another rather stunning example from, what is your name? From Marina. And what Elizabeth was so keen on doing was getting that signature. But like you're like, oh my God, what do I do? Most of us aren't going to be thinking, how do we get that physical evidence, because we're so overwhelmed. But to define an after-death communication, Bill Guggenheim wrote a book called Hello from Heaven, and he collected hundreds of these, and he categorized them all. But what he says an after-death communication is it is a spiritual experience that occurs when someone is contacted directly and spontaneously by someone who has died. So it's not when you go see a medium and a medium gives you a message. That is not what we're talking about here. This is your own personal experience, and you haven't, gone looking. They've just shown up to you. And so it's kind of their choice to show up, and many of us might want them to show up, and it's really important to be open to that experience, but it really is up to that other person. Now, many people say, well, why aren't they coming? Don't they love me? And the truth is, every soul has different abilities, whether you're in a body or not. And so Eben, for example, has regular contact from Betsy and his father in his meditations, but not his mother. And I know his mother. I can kind of maybe see why. It's not something she maybe is interested in, So we still remain those unique souls at the end. It has nothing to do with the loving connection, because I expect your mother will be front in line when it's your turn to go on over there. But these experiences, according to a study published in January 2020, there's not a lot of these studies, and a lot of them are older, but this one was done by Evelyn L. Sacer. She's a Switzerland researcher, and she worked with a lot of UK researchers. And so they surveyed people, I believe, all over Europe, several countries in Europe. And what they found is about 40 to 50%, about half or maybe even more of us are having these experiences. But nobody's talking about them because they sound so nutty. And if you happen to bring it up, someone might just go, and then why would you bring it up again if they just roll their eyes and think, oh, you were just hallucinating. But it's mostly people in particular who have these experiences, are those who are mourning, those who are grieving. But it's not unusual to have it 20 years later as well. They can happen any time. And sometimes it happens when you're in distress. It's not what happened here. So huge gamut of possibilities. But the way that people have these sort of after-death contacts is they might sense a presence. And in this study, 34% of people sensed a presence. So they didn't see anything at all. 43% heard a voice. Now, it didn't necessarily have to be, an audible voice. It could have been a voice in your mind, but you knew it was different than the voice you normally hear in your mind, like your thoughts. Some people feel physical contact. They might feel a touch or a hug. That's about 47%. Some smell a fragrance, 28%. And a whopping largest percentage, 46%, actually see the deceased. And I was pretty shocked when I saw the stats for this. 60% of people who saw their loved ones saw their entire body, just as you described. I love that you shared that story.
Yeah,
it was a
thanks.
perfect segue. How many people have had any of these kinds of contacts? There you go.
Wow, so
Look
it's
at all these
like half
hands.
the room.
Yeah. What was this?
From my dog.
Yes, pets
Yeah,
count.
pets count tremendously.
Pets count.
They have a very rich spiritual connection.
And pets have much shorter lifetimes, so we may have contacts with pets much more than humans, depending on how many pets we've had. But 25% saw just the upper part of the body, and 8% saw just the lower part of the body, which I thought was a little strange. And 2% were a little bit unsure, 12% said other, so they may have had a different kind of way of visualizing their loved one that wasn't in the list. But other ways of having a after-death contact is through electronics. You might get text messages suddenly out of nowhere. We have a story of someone in Canada who reached out and shared with me that his wife, who he had been married to quite a long time, 50, 60 years. People who have been married or together for decades have more likelihood of having these kind of contacts. And his wife, as she was dying, she had cancer. She told him, I'm going to be here for you. Don't worry, I'm not really leaving. And sure enough, shortly after she died, he felt her presence, but he thought he maybe was just wishful thinking, like all of us do. Maybe it's not her, but he really felt like it was her. And she would come to him every night, and they would have these conversations. And then one day, he was telling her that his aunt in England, he lives in Canada, but he's from England, and his aunt in the UK had sent a Christmas card, but he had lost the return address or something, and he didn't know how to reach out to her, and he knew she was going to be really cranky, that he hadn't written back, and so he was concerned about this. And so one morning, he woke up, and her phone was, like many people do, her phone was still on the other side of the bed in its charging device. He never looked at it. And that morning, it had an alert. There was an alert. And so he looked, and right there on the screen was the address of the aunt from his wife's phone. So that's an electronic kind of communication. You can get calls on the phone. We have a neighbor who told us the husband woke up and answered the phone in the middle of the night, and he had a conversation with his father, his deceased father. And the next morning, he thought, wow, that was a really cool dream. And then his wife said, who was on the phone last night that you were talking to? So it's funny how most of us kind of doubt those experiences at first, but then this kind of evidence that happens is really helpful. You didn't have that evidence, no one validated it for you, but that validation can be really helpful. Sometimes it's symbols or a song on the radio or symbols like feathers or pennies or something that reminds you of that person people write about. Suddenly that image shows up everywhere. So there's lots of ways, but this study in particular was not looking at symbols and electronics. It was looking at the actual sensations, seeing, feeling, smelling. And so some people just saw their relative or loved one, and other people received messages. And so 60% of people received a message of some sort, often telepathic, or just a sudden knowing that they had. But these messages are always positive. So they're reassuring. Their loved ones are saying, I'm fine, don't worry about me. The troubles I had, they're all behind me now. And they're resolving. Maybe someone comes to settle an old conflict or pass on a piece of advice, some closure, an apology. Some people have reaffirming messages where it's just, oh, I love you. I'd say most of them are like this. I'll always be with you. We'll meet again. Other people have releasing kind of messages where they're saying, don't be sad. Pursue your life. Your life is so important. You need to be here and live your life. So those are the kind of messages people get. And I also know that these kind of contacts can happen in dreams. And that's when we tend to doubt them the most. But I'll tell you that the most valid kind of dreams about loved ones who have died, there's something different about that dream. It's either more real than real, as many near-death experiencers will say. How many have had dreams about their loved ones? And would you agree that they had a different quality to them? Some of you, yes. And so sometimes people will feel like they're in another world or something's just different than a normal dream. And so I had one of those. My stepfather had died, and he had taken his own life. And so I was incredibly concerned because I had been hearing from different mediums and others that if you take your own life, you will be punished when you die. And so I doubted that, but I still had this kind of thought that I wonder if he's okay. And so first I had a friend, not a medium, but I had a friend who could go into a dream and ask questions for people. I wasn't confident myself, and my dream wasn't happening for me. So he went into a dream, and he found some information that he knew what had happened to him, and I hadn't told him. And so that was kind of validating. But then a few months later, it was about a year after he died, I had a dream of my own. And this dream was different than normal dreams. For me, it was a sense of falling, a sense of movement. And this is something near-death experiencers talk about. They're drawn somewhere. So it was like that. I was just, for me, it was falling, but it was that movement. It was very different and sort of this rushing sound. And that sort of thing can happen in an out-of-body experience, but I hadn't had one of those yet, so this was a little different. So I fell into this dream, and there was Randy. And he looked different. He was very depressed, when he died, and he was just like, if you know someone like this, they're just like this empty, or maybe you've been through it yourself, just this empty shell of a person. He was always so funny, but he wasn't funny anymore. He wasn't clever. He wasn't very conversational. But in this dream, he was back. He was his full, bright, vibrant self. He had a full head of hair. He was bald at the end of his life. He was chatty. He was funny. We were driving together. And the funny thing about Randy is when I was in probably 14 years old, he taught me how to drive, and we did a paper route together. So every single morning at 5 a.m., we were out driving together. So that it made sense. We would be driving, and there was movement there too. And so that was all very kind of interesting for me, but I still had kind of that doubt. Like this was just, I was inventing this experience. But then he told me something. He said, your mother, I'm a little concerned about her, and he always called her your mother, and because she's seeing someone. He's come to the house 3 times, and I'm not sure this is such a great idea. And I was like, okay, so I remembered this. When I was used to writing down my dreams at this point, so I wrote down these fragments of what had happened, including that information. And I didn't talk to my mother frequently. We're not like weekly, daily talkers. And she lived across the country in Arizona at the time, and I was in Baltimore, Maryland. And but I called her and told her about this dream, because I promised her if I ever had contact with him, I would let her know. And I said, well, I told her all about the dream, and then I said, well, he told me about this man who's come to your house 3 times, and it's making him uncomfortable. And she goes, oh my heavens, well, I'm imitating my mother. Oh my heavens, there is a man. And I said, Mom, you're dating again? And it's only been a year. And she said, well, he's a friend from high school, because she went to high school in Arizona, and he had lost his wife recently. And so they had just been kind of formally having dates, and he was a little formal and traditional, so they weren't meeting places like we often do. He was driving to the house, picking her up, and bringing her back. And they had 3 dates that they had done this. And she said she had just decided to end it, that it wasn't something she was interested in pursuing. And so I thought, oh my gosh, there's my evidence. That's my evidence. Very strange. And my mother still hasn't dated again to this day, to my knowledge, and she's quite content doing what she's doing. But so that was kind of an anomaly, and he knew about it. So seemingly our loved ones know what's going on here, and they still remain concerned, and maybe some loved ones are more concerned than others, right? We're all unique. But what we're going to do today is we're going to do an exercise to learn to open and trust spiritual experiences. If you want to, if you're drawn through this conversation to connect with a loved one, you are absolutely welcome to do that when we're in the meditation. I'll be guiding you, but there'll be spaces where you can do your own intentions, and I would recommend, if you wanted to connect with a loved one, to imagine the feeling of what it was like to be with them. That's what you want to do. And they may or may not show up now. They may show up later in a dream, in a full-blown vision 2 years from now. We don't know. But we're going to learn to open and trust. So if you would like, you can find a place to lie down. We do recommend lying down. I know some of you will prefer chairs, cushions. You want to stay in front of these 2 speakers, not up here near the stage. But all the way in the back, you'll be able to hear the sound. And
also
give you
important
a moment to get settled.
is make sure that your feet-head axis is along the long axis of this building.
Yes, if you can.
So you've got one ear to this side, one ear to that side. Don't flip it, or you'll start missing a lot of the power of the signals
Align with
the building.
this way,
Yeah.
like we are sitting.
Yeah.
Like we're sitting. And that way we'll be able to fit more people too if we're all the same direction. So think of this as a Shavasana,
My favorite.
guided Shavasana.
Either way, feet that way or this way, not that way, not that way.
Your feet can face this way or that way. We want your head. Anyway, the reason being is these audio recordings contain binaural beats, and so the left and right signals are what create the sound. But don't think too much about that. Those of you already lying down, just begin to release any tension. Release any distracting thoughts. Begin to focus on your breath and being in this moment. Just a couple more people getting settled. Tomorrow, if you like, you can bring a yoga mat. We will be doing this again. And we're gonna start by doing 3 ohms, just like last night. this divine white light into your body as it provides your highest truth, your greatest potential. Now, say to yourself, I welcome and invite spiritual interaction. I trust any spiritual contact will be helpful and transformative. Now, open yourself to accept any energies that will assist you in spiritual interactions. Return from your experience and remember to welcome and trust spiritual experience. Okay, wiggle your fingers and toes, stretch your arms and legs. My favorite part, give yourself a little hug. Very good. Now, some of you might have trouble finding your words. Take your time. You can get up and return to your chair. You can stay on your mat. It's all up to you, but we would love to hear from you about your experience. And we have our microphone. And some of the things you might have experienced is, in fact, I heard a little snoring. Did anyone feel really relaxed? Yeah. Did you notice your thoughts maybe reduced a little bit? No? Yes, okay, good. Anyone see colors? Cool. So spiritual experience comes in all kinds of ways. Could be a sudden knowing. Can be, oh, we have a question, yes.
I'm just trying to digest what I just experienced, so I'm going to kind of talk as I re-experience this, but
Sure.
It's not what I was expecting, because I've got a brother, grandmother, and dad out there that always communicate with me, but I'm not going to doubt this experience because I felt so different than the usual way, because normally when I get relaxed, my head goes down, but I felt my head being drawn up, and I think by the time I was done, I was completely hyperflexed. But anyway, I got flashes, like just images. Nothing, a picture didn't stay, it was just a flash, and I saw stars. And then I got this sense that I was with a lot of people, and I said, but I couldn't see them, I just sensed their presence. And I said, who is this? And they said, we are your family. But I didn't get a sense that it was the family that I know. Mm-hmm. And then I felt like I was on a spaceship. And I don't know why I think that, but I did get images that I was on a spaceship. I got images of like hallways and corridors and just this really intricate layout. And again, they're flashes, and I'm still trying to make sense of it, but they were dark in color. I think the lights were out. And I said, okay, what am I supposed to do? And they said, we need you to teach humanity about this. And I'm like, what? And they said, the nature of the universe. And I said, I don't know the nature of the universe. And they said, you're going to study it, and you're going to pass it on. I've always been fascinated with the universe, so it doesn't surprise me, but what surprises me was that I ended up on a spaceship with, I think, a space family. Now, I don't know what to do with this information, but I will Google it. I don't know if this is anything that you have experienced.
it's
Of course, yes.
definitely not a place I thought I would find myself.
Well, that's what makes it more valid, the fact that it was unexpected. And when you say that, you've always, loved the universe, well, maybe it's because that's part of your purpose and mission, right? And you maybe didn't put that all fully together. I wouldn't count that as, you just fit it into your interests that you're already interested in. But wow, that was really fascinating. And it's not unusual to encounter beings who are not of this planet. Yes? Wait, he's bringing you the phone.
They were blue. I just got that image.
They were blue. Okay. Well, some will say that Pleiadians are blue. Lots of folks talk about that. But I don't want to plant something like that in your mind because you can go down a rabbit hole and think, oh my gosh, it's this. But I would remain open to all possibilities of, sounds like you just had a kind of a threshold moment. That's life-changing right there, the way you described that. So I would sit with it and ask in later meditations to provide more information. If this particular recording you think set this off, it's available on our website. It's called Heart Center 2, a longer version. So you can go even deeper. It's about twice as long, the one you can get. So it's for you to explore, but it's not unusual for those things. Don't feel that it's so bizarre you can't share it, at least with us. So... yes, we do have the blue guy. That's another blue being, right? But at any rate.
Swami.
Next, yes.
Hi, yeah,
Hi.
you may have just answered my question, but is there a binaural beats you can suggest that I listen to when I get home?
If you go to sacredacoustics.com, and after the workshop, we'll have cards. You can come grab a card to remember. You don't have to write it down. Sacredacoustics.com has this recording, all kinds of recordings. The one we usually recommend to start with is called the Whole Mind Bundle, which gives you a collection in the different brainwave states. But this one, Heart Center 2, is recommended too for people first starting out. We're going to do a very mini version of this at the satsang tonight, so you'll have a little head start. But if you come back tomorrow, it will be a completely different recording, and it will not start with those om sounds. It will be completely different. So if you feel like you didn't have much of an experience today, the frequencies tomorrow might bring one for you. Everyone had an experience, don't get me wrong, but you might think, well, I didn't see my space family, And that we call that experience envy. Don't worry, everyone had the experience they needed to have for themselves today. Anyone else want to share? Yeah. There we go.
Is it on? Okay.
Yeah.
At first, I was found myself like walking around my grandparents' house, and I saw my grandmother, who I see often, and I think that it was like I was trying to be there, and then when I just kind of like stopped like looking for her, it was like I started seeing these like, it's the color changed, the way my body felt changed, and it was like this color, like bright purple swarming energy, and through it, not completely vivid, were all these different faces. Faces that I don't recognize, but faces that I knew.
Yeah.
And then the purple changed, and it was this very vibrant blue. But in the middle of that blue was very bright, like a tunnel or a spherical type shape. But yeah, there were so many. It was just like a rotation of, and they weren't super clear. It was like they were coming out of the color.
Yep. Okay. So you mentioned a few things. So that purpley color. How many people saw sort of a purpley color, or that blue? Yeah, that's pretty common. For me, that's kind of my foundational. Oh, when I see that color, I know I'm in that state where I'm ready to go further. So it's not the end. The faces are also that. not uncommon. The gentleman sitting in front of you who is nodding his head about the faces. You've seen him too, right, Doug? Yeah, so have I. You've seen him?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so a lot of times when you start doing, at least I'll say this type of meditation with the binaural beats. I don't know if it happens in all kinds of meditation, but part of the phase, did anyone else see faces like she described? A number of people. That seems to be rather common. That faces, they kind of come at you, but they don't come all the way at you. And what I've come to my own conclusion, hearing so many versions of this over the years, is that this is part of the spiritual realm that we go through, where all these faces are there. And I don't usually know the faces that I see, but I'm not afraid of them. They seem like they know me, but it seems to be rather common. Sort of a stage that we go through. So I would say you were really finding a foundational space, and when you for further exploration, and that's fantastic. But you mentioned the darker blue and sort of a spherical shape in a tunnel. My suggestion, when you see something like that or sense, go towards it. Tell yourself, go towards it, move through it. It could be some kind of portal. Some people will see eyeballs or doorways or stair steps, and they just look at them. And I'm like, go up the steps, follow the bird, do something with your mind. And that just means with your intention, kind of your mental space, move yourself in that direction. So I think that, do we have time for one more, or do you want to do your closing? Anyone else have a comment?
Back here.
Yeah, let's take that one.
Just eating into smoothie time, so we should probably.
Yeah, hello. I'm really happy to be here. I wrote you a note last night. Even I really enjoyed your last night, and we've been connected for a little while, it seems. So when I was listening to the beats, I found it too intense. Actually, I found it too loud in a way for me. It needs to be, for me personally, more subtle, more gentle. And I found it difficult to get into, let's say, a space where I could see something. I did eventually see something.
Yeah.
But what I realized about myself during it is that I need to be active. I need to be doing something, so I paint. And when I paint, this is when I look at the results afterwards, there's many faces in my paintings that show up because of the way that I paint.
Interesting.
And I've actually had three profound experiences from reading Proof of Heaven, actually. And I've had paintings very strongly linked to somebody that I know or knew of that had passed away recently or was about to pass away.
Beautiful.
So my experiences have been pre-cognitive, and let's say after the person has been in heaven, but also when they're fully alive and nothing ever happens to them. They're more like remote viewing. So it's like a full spectrum of experiences.
Beautiful.
And so that was just my experience and learning today, listening today, was that I realized I need to be active, doing something. Reading is much more powerful way for me to connect than it seems like listening to music. And I do get the communications electronically in other ways. I'm really enjoying this. I'm really loving this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so just to say, everyone is unique. Everyone will find the path that works for them. And just to talk about volume, it's a little loud here because we're doing it in a setting with so many people, but they do not need to be loud. Usually you would listen with speakers to get the left and right signal.
Headphones.
Thank you, sorry, with headphones. And the volume does not need to be loud. You can turn it way down. In fact, I knew someone who listened to one of our recordings at low volume all day long while he was doing activities. And for him, it helped him with his neuropathy, the pain that he had in his body. I'm not necessarily sure that was a great idea, but it worked for him. And so we encourage people to experiment. We do have recordings that will help kind of get you into the creative space. You can play not with headphones. Cosmic Womb is one that comes to mind, really beautiful. That would maybe help you go deeper with your painting and such. But it sounds like you're already well connected. So you found what works for you. But great that you're still exploring. And tomorrow's recording will be very different. It won't be as intense. It'll be much smoother than this one. This one gets a little, I know it does. So at any rate, that brings us to the close, and I think you're going to do a closing prayer?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
very
much.
If we can have a round of applause for Dr. Eben Alexander and Karen Newell. And as they mentioned, they'll be presenting this evening at satsang, and then again tomorrow for a workshop. So just a couple of announcements before I close out. The boutique is open, and today it's pineapple orange smoothies. So they're ready for you. I texted them to let them know that it's closing now. And the other announcement is that on Sunday we will be having a panel presentation, or a panel of all of our speakers during the satsang in the evening. That'll be at 8 o'clock. We would like for you to submit your questions in advance. So if you could be thinking about any questions that you would like to ask our speakers, if you could write those down and take those over to reception, and they'll collect those, and then we'll be going through those, sorting them, and picking from those. Obviously, we won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. All right? Yes. Here. Next. Yes. Thank you. We're having another workshop at 2:15. So we have about 45 minutes. So ocean devotion or smoothies, and we'll have William Peters and Monica Williams joining us at 2:15. So 3 ohms and closing prayers. So Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnat Mudachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate Om Shanti 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 Om peace, peace, peace. Om Bolo Satguru Sivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Bolo Swami Vishnu Devananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Namah Shivaya. Hari Om Tat Sat.